Innovation in distribution is often framed as a race to adopt new technology, from AI to e-commerce to digital sales tools. But what if that's the wrong way to think about it? I'm Mike Hockett, MDM's executive editor, and in this episode of the MDM podcast, I'm joined by Max Meister, co-CEO of Germany-based power transmission products distributor Ludwig Meister, a company that has spent more than a decade building one of the industry's most disciplined and effective innovation models. Their approach? Start with execution, not tools. Instead of leading with customer-facing digital, Ludwig Meister focused first on internal processes, data structure, and operational discipline, building the foundation before scaling outward. In our conversation here, Max shares why so many distributors struggle to turn good ideas into real results, why AI won't fix poor data, and how sequencing your transformation efforts make or break long-term success. MDM and NAW's Shift Conference is rapidly approaching on May 12th through the 14th, and it's all about turning concepts and best practice insights into action and processes. There aren't many distributors that better exemplify our Shift content pillars of hybrid sales, digital transformation, data analytics, and culture better than Ludwig Meister, which was the subject of MDM's latest case study feature. We also preview Max's upcoming session at Shift, where attendees will benchmark their progress across those pillars. If you're trying to cut through the noise around digital transformation and focus on what actually works, that's what our discussion is all about. Enjoy. Max, welcome back to the MDM podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Mike, for having me.
Well, MDM and most prominently Tom Gale have been writing about Ludwig Meister for about a decade now. And so there's probably a lot of longtime MDM readers that are familiar with your company's story, but there are certainly plenty who aren't, and especially among NAW's membership. So let's start with a brief introduction to who you are and then who Ludwig Meister is in terms of what it looks like today.
Yeah, I'm running Ludwig Meister together with my sister. It's a family-owned business, third generation, and we are a power transmission, fluidics, and tools distributor from Munich, Germany. We have about 300 people and 140 million euros, US dollars revenue. And maybe one speciality is we have about 70% of our revenue is OEM. So it's not about spare parts, it's about OEM business.
All right, well, that gives us a nice snapshot of what Ludwig Meister looks like today. And MDM's content and our Shift conference have long been all about change management and taking concepts and turning them into process and execution. And I know that's an area of your expertise here. Most distributors think of innovation as adopting new technology, but your story and our case study on your company really suggest that it's an execution challenge. So, from your perspective, why do so many companies get that wrong?
I think it is easy to have a good idea, especially for general managers or CEOs. They are on a conference, they see a software or they see a tool, and they think, that solves all my problems, for example, pricing or whatever. And when you come back home and you tell this great idea to your team, and you got the first questions, how to implement it, how the data stream works, and all this stuff, then reality kicks in. And I think this is the biggest problem, that usually a tool is not solving a problem. You really have to have good process design, and with AI now also context design. But I think that's a key issue. And it is very difficult to really implement new tools with real traction. That takes time, and you have to be very good in change management.
Yeah, and you have to have a firm understanding of the expected ROI when it comes to these tools that you might not see an ROI for 3 or 6 months or longer. So there's, I think, such an appetite for immediacy when it comes to seeing a payoff with these tools. But like you said, it certainly takes time. A central theme in Ludwig Meister's journey over the past, let's call it 6 to 8 years, is in sequencing, building capabilities in the right order. And that can be difficult right now when distributors feel pressured to innovate on so many fronts simultaneously, whether that's digital transformation, their pricing strategy, M&A, Salesforce organization, or elsewhere. So, from your perspective, what does real sequencing look like in practice?
We call it Ludwig Meister style. So we started digitizing as far away as possible from the customer. So it is easy to build a fancy website, but if everything in the background is not working, you only scale chaos, and you will have unhappy customers, and you will have outside salespeople that have to deal with unhappy customers. So what we did is we started in purchasing to digitize, and then later on in logistics, and then we made a CRM, and then pricing, and now we are very close to the customer. But it takes a long breath, so it is very tempting to buy a new website or to start a new website and think, this will push my revenue about 20%. But the problem is also when the reality kicks in, you see that you need good, reliable processes and a good data structure, and that's much more important even now in times of AI, in our point of view.
Yeah. There's such a hyper focus on the customer, especially since COVID onward. And with that comes that, like you said, that appetite for adding new tools as fast as you can that serve the customer immediately. But like you said, without the infrastructure and the back end capability there, a lot of those tools might fail if you don't have the internal infrastructure in place before you have anything facing external. So it's a hard thing to get right, but it's great to hear about how you guys have made it work.
And you need a long breath. Because you don't see the results in the beginning, and you cannot go to conferences and tell cool stories because nobody knows what you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, AI is all the rage in nearly every industry right now, and that's certainly true in distribution. And our MDM latest research took a deep dive on AI in this industry, which we'll detail on stage at Shift. And it shows a remarkable level of adoption in this industry, which historically is not known for being a tech leader. In all of our research, the biggest hesitancy distributors point to for why they haven't jumped in or scaled AI in their organization is that their data isn't good enough. We hear it all the time. Your team at Ludwig Meister invested years in data before leaning into AI. So, can you touch on how much simpler that made adopting AI rather than having to figure out the data piece at the same time? And then, what do you see as the risk for distributors trying to jump into AI without having that data infrastructure really set first?
Maybe I answer the second question first. My biggest fear is that companies and leaders of companies think that AI will solve their data problems, and this will not happen. In my point of view, it will only get worse because you automate maybe chaos and problems. And I'm very sure that AI will not help digitize. It will be a new competition, new companies rising and stuff like this, but it will not help. It is a tool basically.
Yeah.
And answering the first question, for us, AI is just a tool. So we don't start AI projects, but we ask what we want to achieve, what are our objectives and key results. And when we see that AI is a good solution for one part of the process, then we implement it by ourselves. So we don't build LLMs, that we use them. And we have machine learning for lead time calculation, for example. It's also hosted by us. But AI is just a tool. I think it's much more important that you are good in process design. So if you look at a complex process, for example, like making a quotation from a PDF that is coming in, you have to identify the SKUs, you have to identify the customer, and then you have to have the right customer segmentation. So it's some kind of marketing with a customer potential. And then you need your pricing engine. So it's a lot of steps. And if you want to solve everything with one tool, with AI, it will not work. But if you have a good process design and you cut it into small steps, then you are able to digitize maybe something in the beginning, something in the middle, something in the end, and then it gives a picture. But it also takes process design as a skill and time to really get results. Yeah.
And I know that it's tough for distributors who aren't deeply involved with AI yet because they're now seeing all these use cases and examples of these great things that distributors have done with AI. But to your point, if you don't have that data component figured out first, it's going to be very messy to try to do it at the same time. So I think distributors, it's very understandable if they are hesitant to jump right in. It's almost a good thing to have some hesitation there and get the infrastructure in place.
Yes, and also I think the speed of the development is so fast at the moment. For example, we built a custom GPT before custom GPTs were made by OpenAI, and we
Wow,
invested a lot of intelligence and how to do it and stuff like this. And 3 months later, all our ideas were worthless. So I think maybe it's not the best thing to jump on the hype on every hype train, and it's better to now work on data, make an AI architecture, think about what is the long term plan, and then decide when you're really jumping on the train. Yeah.
that's great. Well, along with anything customer facing, sales transformation is often one of the first moves distributors make, given that at their core, distributors are selling organizations. But Ludwig Meister made sales transformation one of the last or most recent strategic moves that it has made. Why is that?
It's very tempting to start with sales because usually it's the biggest workforce, the biggest part, and you think that you have the highest rewards. But the problem is if you do a sales transformation without good processes in the background, the people have to take more care about, I don't know, customer segmentation and stuff like this they change, for example, departments, and they cannot really take care of the customer and really add value for the customer. And then it's difficult. And you get a lot of pushback because you maybe have a good idea, but it's not working in daily life. So that is why we said, okay, first maybe we tidy up the background, and then we go on stage and we really try to do a sales transformation. And if you follow if the listeners follow the MDM content, there were so many stories about sales transformation, inside, outside sales transformation, and stuff like this. You really have to be sure what you want to do. And we took quite some years to really find our way, and now we are doing a very complex sales transformation.
Very interesting. Well, I want to touch on culture here, as that has been a vital component of Ludwig Meister's success. You've said that innovation only works when it becomes part of daily operations rather than in a vacuum and when meetings are just dedicated to innovation. So, what did you do culturally to really make that stick and foster a culture of innovation?
Um, we implemented in 2019 a business method called Objectives and Key Results. In the US, also very famous is EOS traction. And it's basically a way to really prioritize and plan the resources and really the goals for maybe the 90 or 120 days. And this was a game changer for our company because today we handle 130 projects at the same time, and we only have 300 people. And the general management and IT department is no longer the bottleneck because
Mm,
you have more people really pushing forward because they really want their projects to be successful because they were pitching it in a management workshop, for example, and then they get the resources and they always show up on time and they want to be successful. And this was a big change in our company because in the past, I went to an MDM conference. I came back. I had 20 ideas, and I made everybody nervous. I said, this is interesting, and here and pricing and logistics and whatever. But the problem is, if you don't get traction, ideas don't help, and that was a big change for us. And our culture now is, I have, for example, have a very interesting idea in my point of view. I have to pitch it in the management workshop. And if my people think the effort is too high or the impact is not high enough, we are not doing it. So
yeah.
that's the same for the CEO or co-CEO. We for example, for a team leader from logistics. Everybody has the right to pitch, and sometimes your projects are declined. Yeah.
I love that Shark Tank type of mentality there in that process. And it's something I've heard from a couple other very successful distributors that it works for them because, again, it puts intentionality behind these ideas rather than saying, let's just try this. It's
Mhm.
getting stakeholder feedback and getting them involved in the process and a group vote on what are we doing next. So that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. And innovation is not about having ideas. Innovation is about really implementing stuff and seeing what works and then adapting and changing and getting it to work. So, and this takes time. Yeah.
At Shift, attendees are going to benchmark themselves across sales, digital, data analytics, and culture. And our cohort specific roundtable sessions are a great format to do that in just small group discussions with non competitors and people that outside of your own industry that you or your market where you can get ideas from. With that, where do you think distributors maybe most commonly overestimate their maturity?
Actually, I think still in digital transformation,
Mm.
unfortunately. And in Germany, I think the company culture is quite a good value, but I don't know how it's in the US, how overestimated it is. But I think digital transformation is still not as mature as some people think. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, it'll be great to see the results of that benchmarking at Shift. Well, that's really all I have for you here, Max. We are very much looking forward to having you back at Shift and on our main stage as a featured speaker. As we finish up here, is there anything in particular you're most interested in hearing from distributors or asking them there in Denver?
Yeah, actually, I have two topics. So the first one is I'm very interested in sales transformation models that worked, different customer segmentation and needs-based, value-based segmentation and stuff like this. So everybody who has done something interesting, this would be very interesting for us. And for my keynote, I would really appreciate if the listeners just send in questions. So you can maybe connect me or put my LinkedIn profile in the podcast because my goal is to really add value for the audience. So it's not about marketing for Ludwig Meister. It is about adding value. And I really want to show what is in our, I don't know, engine of the company and how it's working. So if there are any topics somebody is interested who maybe read the issue from Tom Gale or whatever, I'm very happy to include this in my presentation.
Absolutely. I think not only are you going to get a lot of out of this, but I think the MD or the Shift attendees are going to get a lot of great takeaways from yourself and certainly from the case study written by Tom Gale. So I will definitely promote both of those and insert a call to action for ask Max any questions at Shift on stage that you're curious about. Well, with that, Max, thanks again for joining the MDM podcast, and we'll look forward to seeing you in Denver.
Yeah, thank you. It's an honor. And yeah, all the best.
Thanks for listening to the MDM podcast, brought to you by our Shift conference coming May 12th through the 14th in Denver. If you like what you just heard, you can find all of our past episodes at mdm.com/podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts.